Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Chase, aka That Gay Jedi, and welcome to another video. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. I kind of want to talk about cults for a second, if that's okay. Mandalorian season 3 has been, I think we just finished episode 4, meaning we're halfway through the season, and honestly, I have found it to be like kind of a frustrating watch, and I have like some, things that don't really work for me in this series that I'm kind of saving for later. I want to see like the whole picture before I start talking about the show and like specific grievances, and part of the reason why I have to wait for the whole picture is because I don't really know what's going on. But I'm biting my tongue on that. And specifically, I kind of wanted to hop online here today. I don't know, this is the first time I felt like super like excited by a video idea that I literally just came up with today, kind of put the outline together today, and I'm putting it out tonight. But I've seen a lot of people online talking about sort of like their frustrations with Children of the Watch, meaning me. Like, I am very frustrated with the Children of the Watch, and like I feel like it's pretty culty, and like to be going back to it is antithetical to the story I thought I was watching in seasons 1 and 2. That being said, if that's not the story, that's totally cool, and I respect all the storytellers. But a lot of people online in the discourse that has caused me to spend a lot less time on Twitter these days. The discourse has been interesting around like if Children of the Watch is a cult or not, and also a lot of similarities between the Children of the Watch and the Jedi Order, because there are some similarities there, but like I just kind of wanted to hold them up next to each other, the Children of the Watch and the Jedi Order. Are they cults? Do they have cult traits? Which one has more cult traits than the other? And this is all like just my opinion, and a lot of it's really going to be sort of like when I'm answering these questions, they're going to be rooted more in like the narrative framing of these organizations and of these groups and of these cultures. It's not going to be so much like literal canonical evidence and breakdowns and all that kind of stuff. It's just going to be like sort of like the vibe. We're doing a cult vibe check. So stay tuned. Okay, so I went online and I came up with a list of 10 things that like are signs of cults, like 10 telltale signs that you're in a cult. And we're basically going to go through all 10 of them and hold up the Children of the Watch and the Jedi Order and see which one checks out. And I will have 2 scoreboards right here on the bottom of the screen to keep count of the cult tallies. And we will see where that brings us. So the first one is having one living leader as sort of like the complete authority. And right away, Children of the Watch kind of has this with the armorer. I mean, I'm not sure how much information we're missing in terms of the Mandalorian show itself, but they really make her to be like the mother of the house of Children of the Watch. And while I love that for her, and while I find her to be somewhat of a compelling character, despite the fact that we don't know much about her, she is definitely giving like that one living total authority figure. While on the other hand, the Jedi don't really have like a living authority figure. They actually, in my opinion, kind of like work against it in a way, because they have like, I mean, their like ultimate leader, I guess, would be like the Force, the will of the Force. But then they have like they have a Jedi council with like a bunch of people on it. And then even if you break it down further, like if you're a Padawan, you have a Jedi Master. Like there's different levels of authority, which I think kind of like would not give the Jedi Order a point on this. So we're going to go ahead and give our first point to Children of the Watch. The second one is sort of a hyper focus on bringing in new members. That is a sign of a cult. And both of them actually score points for this. Obviously, we see the foundlings brought into Children of the Watch, even if they're birds that can't talk and are brought in from a stolen nest that its mother was killed. Anyways, there's also, of course, like children, younglings, and Jedis and everything like that. So both of them get a point. Third is like an us versus them mentality. And I find this to be kind of interesting because the Jedi like are very, very extreme, but I can't really think of a time where they're like very, very us versus them. There are times in the prequels where it's like the Jedi Council is very much us versus them, but overall, like the whole order isn't necessarily it's us versus them. There's a lot more of like a desire to live in harmony with the will of the Force. I mean, actually, there is like the us versus them in terms of the Sith, but that's like different. It's not like us versus them as in like us versus the entire outside world, where like with Children of the Watch, we really get the vibe that it's us versus them, as in we are Mandalorians, we are Children of the Watch, and this is the way, this is what we're doing, and it's us versus them. And like if you're not a Mandalorian and you're not a part of the Children of the Watch, or if you're a Mandalorian that takes off their helmet, then you're not a part of the Children of the Watch. So that like has a lot more of a us versus them mentality. So I'm going to go ahead and give a point to Children of the Watch. Another sign of a cult is like paranoia of the outside world. And like the Jedi again, I don't really think they have a paranoia of the outside world. I think they have a paranoia of the Sith, but that's more of like an obsession with the Sith. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that there's a bigger picture with the Jedi versus like the Children of the Watch or Children of the Cult. I almost just called them Children of the Cult. The Children of the Watch like really do have that paranoia of the outside world, and honestly, a lot of Mandalorians do. Like, and as they should. Like, they've been through a lot as a people and as a culture, but the Children of the Watch have like definitely carry that paranoia with them, even when it comes to like rumors of like their home planet and like there's the paranoia. The paranoia is there, so I have to give a point to Children of the Watch. Another telltale sign of being in a cult is sort of the oppression of personal identity. And the Jedi do this more or less, but I think that like for the most part, like you are an individual person with like an identity when you're in the Jedi Order. Like there are different ways of being, and like there's sometimes is respect amongst the Jedis for their different ways of being, especially before the prequels. But yeah, like for the most part, like people kind of have like a sense of who they are individually, and they get to show their faces and have like a physical manifestation of individuality. Whereas Children of the Watch, of course, you know, this is the way we have to we cannot remove our helmets, otherwise we fall out of the group. And like while the Mandalorians can like paint their things and wear like the insignia of like their houses or whatever they're called, like that's cool, but like it's not necessarily, it's still tribal and it's still community based as opposed to like individualism. So I have to say that like the oppression of individuality is very much a thing in Children of the Watch, and that's my opinion. So I don't know what you think, but yeah. The sixth telltale sign of a cult that I found was sort of like the emphasizing of special doctrines outside of scripture. So like the Mandalorians sort of have like a way of being across all Mandalorians, right? And it's actually something that I think is like really beautifully reflected in the armor this season, reminding that Bo-Katan that like the mythosaur is for all Mandalorians. So love that. Way not to gatekeep, Queen, but there is sort of like an emphasis on special doctrines in terms of like this is the way, as in the Children of the Watch have their way, and that is the way. And again, like I can't really say anything outside of like episode 4 season 3 because we don't know what happens or where that goes, or maybe like we're gonna redefine what this is the way means. But to me, like narratively, this is the way is very much that is them like saying, yeah, there's this whole like, you know, understanding of what it is to be a Mandalorian, but this is the special way to do it, and this is what makes us Children of the Watch. Which again, like I'm kind of here for like this exploration of cultures and cultures preserving themselves, but it is pretty rough to transition into that, just given like the history we have of Death Watch and like them being the Children of the Watch. Like the Death Watch has always been sort of positioned as violent extremists, and yeah, I think that people out there that are concerned are very valid to be concerned, and people who aren't concerned, slay. Don't be concerned. That's cool too. I don't really care. It's just Star Wars. But for me, yeah, the Children of the Watch definitely get a point on this, and the Jedi don't. Like they have like their scripture, but there's not really like any special doctrines that are like embedded in the Jedi. And I think this kind of like leads to a bigger point about comparing these two that I learned in this breakdown, and that is there's just one Jedi Order, and so we have nothing really to like compare it to. Like there's not other sects of the Jedi Order, which is something that I would love to see. But like for the most part, in like mainstream Star Wars media, there isn't more than one Jedi Order. It's just the Jedi Order. So there's not really like one sect of it that's broken off and it emphasizes this like a special thing. Whereas with the Mandalorians, we've seen different Mandalorian clans, and we've seen some of them live a little bit more outwardly and less in a cave on a planet. And I think that also kind of makes this difficult to like pinpoint, and this being like my emotional experience watching the show and trying to decide if like the Children of the Watch like are cool or not. But yeah, just the nature of there being more than one Mandalorian sect, but this one being like an extreme group of it doesn't bode well when it comes to weighing if Children of the Watch is a cult or not. You know what I mean? Another telltale sign of a cult is penalizing and isolating members that are no longer members, so ex-members. And Children of the Watch is definitely going to get a point for this one, because as soon as you take off your helmet, you're a Mandalorian no more. Not only like you're not a child of the Watch anymore, you're literally not a Mandalorian anymore. And that goes back to like the special doctrine thing and like the extremism. And they literally just kicked Din out and were really rude to him and not very nice to my boy, who learned oh so much over the first 2 seasons. But yeah, like to ostracize people to kick people out and then to like further isolate them and penalize them and like make them go on a dangerous quest to bathe in the waters of Mandalore. door and then they can come back into the club. Like that is, I will just say they get a point for this. And I also will say that I think the Jedi should get a point for this too. We see through characters like Ahsoka Tano in the Clone Wars, like, yes, like if you get ostracized from the Jedi or they are suspicious of you for some type of thing, like you don't generally get to come back. And like, I know there's like probably multiple like canonical like explanations and examples of other ways this played out. But I think again, like the purpose of this video is to talk about the general narrative of Star Wars and sort of more mainstream Star Wars. And Jedi do sort of like have this mentality too, where if you leave the Jedi Order, then it's kind of like you lost your way type of thing. So a point each just to be fair for this. The 8th cult sign that I have down is like the narrowing of an emotional experience or like emotional expression. And I really think the Jedi deserve a point for this. I don't really see a lot of like emotional control in Children of the Watch necessarily, but the emotional control in the Jedi is off the charts. But I think it's like, what's interesting about the emotional control in the Jedi is like that's there because it is a flaw. Like we see them being emotionally controlling of like Anakin, for example, so that we can see why, you know, one of the many reasons why Anakin turned to the dark side. So it definitely scores them a point for being cultish, but I also think that like that's the intention. And I think that that's kind of something I'm missing in Mandalorian right now, where it's like, what is the intention with Children of the Watch? Are they cool baddies? Are they just like too cool for school? Or are they just like too much of a cult? Let me know. Another telltale sign of a cult is like questioning authority and like getting in trouble for doubting authority or doubting the way. And we haven't really seen a lot of this, so I don't really know how it plays out for Children of the Watch. So like they're safe. They're not going to get a point, but I'm also going to say we don't know for sure. The Jedi definitely are going to get a point for this though, because obviously like, especially in the prequels, again, like questioning the Jedi and questioning the will of the Force and all this stuff and like asking even like what that means. Like there's a lot of people, specifically like characters like Mace Windu or even like Yoda in the prequels, like people like don't condone that way of thinking, and they just think it all leads to the dark side and it's all bad and you shouldn't like ever question your faith, which is a very toxic thing. And like, yeah, definitely a sign of a cult, so the Jedi get a point with that. But I'd also say that once again, it's kind of the point. And I think that that context is important to the Jedi. And so, you know, when we own that something's a cult, it's actually kind of interesting and can make for good stories. But I don't, again, really know where we're going with Mando. And then the last one is sort of like the leader is above the law and like rules don't apply to the cult leader. You know, we don't know about that much about the armor, like I said earlier. So like maybe this does apply to the armor. We don't know. I don't even think that we can figure out who to apply it for the Jedi. So like no points to either party, but I just thought I'd mention it because we'll have to see where the armorer develops. So I think the total scores are 7 points to Children of the Watch and 4 points to the Jedi. But I'd also argue that the 4 points to the Jedi should really be 2 points to the Jedi, because 2 of those points were like narratively functional to like what was happening in Star Wars at the time. Like it was important that they were kind of culty in a way because it served for the progress, the development of the characters that we were staying with. And so again, I'm not really making judgment on any of these things. I just think it's an interesting thing to talk about, because with Mandalorian, we might see these cult-like behaviors play out in a similar way with Din and Grogu. Maybe they walk away from it. Maybe they redefine it. Maybe they lead Children of the Watch into the light and kind of free them up a little bit. So we can't really pass judgment on it, but I would say Children of the Watch, I don't know if you're a cult, but you definitely seem like a cult. But anyways, that's all I got for today. I just thought it'd be like interesting to talk about. So let me know if you're interested by liking the video and leaving a comment. Let me know your thoughts on the cult vibes or the non-cult vibes. And if you're worried for our boy Grogu, who's just being buried underneath dogmatic armor. Yeah, wow. Okay. Anyways, got a lot more to say, but that's the exploration for today. Thank you so much for watching. It means the world. And yeah, I hope you're having a good one. May the Force be with you always.